a very emotional and painful subject, of course, but the main thing I want to say is that most Americans and most people in the Western world do not understand what communism is about. Very often I watch news experts and they say communism as opposed to free market capitalism. And basically people are talking about the economic system. Communism is first, way before economic system, is a religion. It has a God. His name is Lenin. It has a church. Its name is the Communist Party of the USSR. It has its prophets. It has its rituals. It has its texts. It has the Bible. It has everything. So most Americans, even my congregants, after listening to me for 25 years, they still get surprised sometimes to say, oh, it was that bad. So for example, last week I began my speech, my bar mitzvah speech, by speaking in Russian. And they were laughing. And then I translated it into English. And in the beginning, they were laughing. And what I said is what every Soviet child would say at an important event in his life, which is, glory to the Communist Party of the USSR. Lenin lived. Lenin lives. Lenin will live forever. We live in the most perfect society on earth. The future of humanity is glorious communist paradise. Death to American imperialism and Israeli Zionism. That's basically what we said, with a few variations. I would say I said those words at least once a week. And then in summer camps, a major event and so on. So I believed in my God. Lenin was the most important hero, the most important person in my childhood. I was willing to inform on my parents if they told a joke against either Lenin or even Brezhnev, our leader. I was a good patriot. I was willing to die to destroy imperialism in America. And that's basically typical. Every Soviet child, I would say, with a few exceptions, believed in what they taught us. So when we say misinformation, it's not strong enough. I would say it's a passionate, aggressive brainwashing that has been extremely successful. So the most obvious example is I'm still the only conservative rabbi from the former Soviet Union in America, the only one. So we have about 800,000 Jews from Russia in this country. I'm the only one, the first one and the only one, and I'm scared that I will be the last one. Because most Russian Jews, and I have a few Russian Jews in this congregation, and they come for special occasions. They come for Purim to drink vodka and to get dressed up and have fun. But still, they don't get it. They don't understand how somebody like me, a former physicist, believes in God and believes in strange stories like what we're going to celebrate next week, the sea splitting and the slaves walking through and the Egyptians drowning. And they think it's a little bit weird that I am a logical, intelligent person who believes in this stuff. Basically, the Soviet government, it was extremely successful in brainwashing millions and millions of people. The first time in history, we have millions of Jews who never heard about Hanukkah. I never heard about bar mitzvah. I mean, it's bizarre. I've been a rabbi all these years, and only last week did I have my bar mitzvah. I was like a kid. My children presented me with a prayer shawl, and my sister spoke on behalf of our parents who are not here, who could not be here, obviously. They're gone. But it is a sad story. I mean, it's a victory. Just once again shows that we are here, and the communist Soviet Union is gone. We're here, and Nazi Germany is gone. We're here, the Crusaders are gone. The Roman Empire is gone. It is a victory story, but I was very emotional. I was choking up during my speech, and you can see that speech. So it's a sad story. For the first time in history, we have millions, and the same is true in Israel. Russian Jews opened up pork and ham stores and restaurants all over Israel. The first time in history. We don't have any other group of Jews who are buying Christmas trees all over Israel now. And the local Israelis, the native Israelis, are very hurt. Even the most secular Israelis, they don't understand. You're celebrating Christmas, you're eating ham. On Yom Kippur, you're having parties. And the Russian Jews are laughing and kind of, they don't get it. They don't understand us. So we're talking about another planet. That's what I used to say to people. The Soviet Union was not another country, was not another system. It was another planet. I'll give you one more example. Maybe we'll go to, I'm sure you have many other questions. I used to teach physics. Now, physics is kind of like, it's objective. It's the laws of nature. Only after I got out of that country did I find out that every law of nature that I used to teach Soviet children, this is the Popov. Alexander Popov invented radio. And my American friends in my language school in Jerusalem said, who? Who is Popov? We never heard about him. I said, what do you mean? We have a holiday. May 7th is the radio day, Alexander Popov. They looked at me, they looked at each other, and I said, either I'm crazy or they are crazy. They don't know Popov. Every child knows Popov. And then I said, what about the engine, the steam engine? Is it Ivan Pirogov? They say, who? They never heard any. So even in physics, I mean, it's basically, imagine, it's like the earth is shaking. I used to teach physics, and suddenly I say, oh my gosh, they lied to me even about science. They lied about everything, of course, because everything had to be invented and discovered by a Russian scientist, of course. We cannot say anything. Although I heard about Einstein, that's true. They couldn't get rid of Einstein. So that's my background. Now, my religious education took place in one day. Yuri Gagarin was my hero, the first cosmonaut who went into space. And you know, in the Soviet Union, every child, you would ask him in the streets, who do you want to be? What do you want to be? Nobody said, I want to be a hockey player or a basketball player. Everybody wanted to be like Gagarin, and that he was my hero. And I remember very well when he came back to Earth, there was a big press conference. They stopped the factories, the schools. We were all brought into the huge rooms with these black and white tiny television sets. And I remember Khrushchev asked him, so Comrade Gagarin, you're the only one who has been up there. Tell us the truth. Did you find God? Did you see him? And I was very curious. I was 8 years old. I was so excited to hear what my hero is going to say. And he smiled broadly and said, nope, I was looking for him. He's not there. There is no God. That was it. That was in April of 1961. So since April 1961, basically anybody who discovered Jesus or found the Bible, anybody who would stand up and say, I think I believe in God, was taken away to a mental institution. You must be mentally sick to believe in God. After what Gagarin told you, after all, he has been there. He has seen it. So that was my religious education. My Jewish education began earlier when I was 6 years old, and I was playing soccer with a neighbor, and we collided, and he got up and he called me Žid, which in English is approximately filthy kike. And I did not know the word. I said, what'd you call me? He says, you go home and find out. So I asked my father that night, I said, Papa, what does it mean, Žid? What does it mean? And now most people in America would think this is a good opportunity for a father to sit down with his child and to tell him about Jewish history, to tell him about the Torah, about Passover. My father said, don't play with this boy. There are good boys in this neighborhood. That was it. So I didn't even understand what it meant. Although, on the other hand, the government doesn't allow you to forget. So my first day in school, I walked in, I was very emotional, excited. I was standing there with flowers in my white uniform. I was standing and looking forward to learning about the world, meeting my new friends. And the teacher walked in and she says, good morning, my name is Maria Ivanovna. Let's introduce ourselves. Give us your name, your last name, and your nationality. And I did not know that word. I said, I don't know, what's my nationality? So I figured I would listen to the other kids. And so a few kids got up, 3 Russians, 5 Moldavians, 3 Ukrainians. I said, I must be a Russian, after all, I speak a Russian language. So I stood up and I said, I am Leonid Feldman, and I'm a Russian. And Maria Ivanovna sternly looked through her thick glasses and said, don't lie to us, Feldman. Tell your comrades the truth. And I was shaking, and I said, why would I lie? I mean, this is my first day in school. I'm not lying. She says, you're lying. It's written right here. Who are you? What's your nationality? And I began to cry, and I said, I don't know. What is it? And this is how I discovered. She says, you're Jewish, Feldman, and don't ever try to hide this. So that's how I discovered that word, Jewish. So I knew Žid for a couple of years, and then I learned Jewish for my September 1st, my first day in school at the age of 7. And the rest gets much worse, basically. By the time I was 9, 10, I knew I would never become an engineer. I would never become a journalist. I would never become a diplomat. I would never become a TV reporter. I would never become a principal of a high school, a manager of a factory, basically just because I was a Feldman. At the age of 14, I found out that even in chess, which is supposed to be kind of objective, neutral, even in chess, Feldman does not have a chance. I became a champion of my republic, Moldova, among young people. And so as a champion, I was supposed to represent Moldavia at that time in Leningrad national championship. So I was very excited. I couldn't sleep at night. I was dreaming chess. I was playing chess at night in the middle of my sleep. And then 2 weeks before the departure, I got called into the Moldavian Sports and Recreation Committee, and the bureaucrat said, we decided not to send you to Leningrad. I said, why? What have I done? What do you mean? I'm ready. I'm proud. He says, you understand, Feldman cannot represent Moldavia. I said, but I was born here. And I'm the champion, and I'm proud to represent Moldavia. Get out of here. So that's how at 14 I knew even in chess I don't have a chance. So you get slapped. On the one hand, you don't know what it means. It's just a stamp in your ID card. And you cannot hide it. People have asked me over the years, would I cut my wrist if I could change that line on my passport? My answer is absolutely. I envied my Moldavian, Ukrainian, Russian classmates constantly. I would do anything to change my last name or the line in the passport, because it's a horrible thing. You carry it on your shoulders constantly wherever you go. It's basically racism. It's not religious persecution. I remember people used to say, you suffered religious persecution. I said, no, I didn't know what religion was. It was not religious persecution. It's not a religion in the Soviet Union. It's just basically racism. Because of that stamp, because of my last name, I knew I was a third-class citizen. And I mean third, because wherever you are, let's say in Moldavia, so the principal of a high school will always be a Moldavian. The assistant principal will be a Russian. Maybe number 3 would be a Jew. The same is true in every area. Manager of a factory, there will be a Moldavian, then will be a Russian, and maybe, if you're brilliant, you will be number 3. So you're not even a second-class citizen, you're a third-class citizen, just because you're a Jew. And I have to say, I go back every few years. It has not changed on a street level, popular level. It's still the same. I arrived, I took a group from this congregation this last July, and the security guy who kind of welcomed us at the airport said, you better take off your yarmulke, it's not safe here. In a subway, rabbis have been attacked and so on. It's not coming from the government, at least not in Russia. Putin does not encourage anti-Semitism. But in Ukraine, there is a party that is number 3 right now that is very anti-Semitic. And so you could see on the television, they will have a discussion, and one of these major leaders will say, how come the richest person in Ukraine has a name of Abramovich and Goldberg? Well, they don't belong. They have a country called Israel. What are they doing here? So the most successful businessmen slowly kind of moving to London or to Jerusalem. There are lots of oligarchs, former oligarchs, who live in Israel now and in London. For some reason, London is very popular. And they invest their money in Cyprus. So this week is a very hot, interesting situation. A lot of the oligarchs are very nervous. That's how they've been avoiding paying taxes to Putin. And that's why Putin does not want to help Cyprus. You know, this week, the president went to Moscow and he did not get any support. Anyway, so, certain things have changed. So today, in the former Soviet Union, in most places they have synagogues. It's okay to educate your children. You can find books in Hebrew. I never saw a book, not only in Hebrew, I never saw a letter in Hebrew. If somebody found a book in my apartment in Hebrew, my father would go to Siberia. Hebrew was illegal. They allowed Yiddish for a complicated reason, but not Hebrew. Oh, absolutely. It's not just the textbooks. Generally, you could not find one book in any library in that country that would say anything positive about America or Europe or the free world, basically. So textbooks, the only thing we knew about America was it's evil. Black people, on television, they will show us only a white policeman hitting a black person in the streets and homeless people in the streets. When I came out of there, I was stunned. I mean, I remember I used to tell stories about my first visit to a supermarket. I will never forget that day. It changed my life. I walked in, I opened my mouth, and I stood there for 40 minutes just trying to absorb this. I've never seen such a beautiful museum in my life. I thought it was a museum. And then I said, oh, because I was a dissident, they're trying to impress me, so this must be a special museum that they send me to. I mean, literally, this physicist was so brainwashed that I couldn't believe that you can actually have 25 kinds of cheese and yogurt and oranges, 5 kinds of oranges, and this is Israel, a poor country, suffering and so on. Meanwhile, all my life, I stood in line for bread. We stood in line every day for a piece of butter and cheese and for everything. And vegetables, you walked into the store, the shelves were empty and there were potatoes there. And you were lucky, you felt lucky that you got a kilo of potatoes. And so everything was so, and at the same time, they're telling us this is the best society in the world. Nothing comes close, because we have free education and free medicine and so on and so forth, which is also a big lie. Today there is free medicine there. In front of my entire group on the bus, I turned to our guide and I said, Irina, please tell my group, what does it mean that you can actually get free medical services in this country? And she says, my husband was diagnosed with cancer 2 years ago. She says, I had to sell my apartment within 24 hours. Within 24 hours, I sold whoever bought this apartment to bribe the nurses and the doctors. Otherwise, my husband would be in the corridor dying. Nobody would bring a glass of water to him. And there are scandals like this. Once in a while, it's on television and newspapers. They found a homeless a person just fell down, had a heart attack. They brought him into the corridor of the local hospital. The family did not know that he had a heart attack. He did not have a cell phone, whatever. This person was sitting there for 12 hours. Nobody offered him a glass of water. This is free. There is free medicine. It's true. In Kiev, in Moscow, in St. Petersburg, you can get free medicine today. But if you don't pay, even the nurse will not change your bandage. You have to, she said, when she heard that he got sick, she immediately took a taxi, ran home, took whatever cash she had in the house, ran into pharmacy, paid to buy syringes and whatever bandages, whatever it was, the basics. Otherwise, there are no syringes. You will die in a hospital. This is today. This is last August, we were in Kiev. Okay, the second largest country of the former Soviet Union. And the same is true in Moscow. Now, of course, oligarchs and so on, and Putin's friends, they get first class. I mean, and most of the time, if it's something serious, they will be on a private plane and they will go to Zurich or Berlin or London immediately. And I know some of them come to Palm Beach because we have a couple of doctors here that are, world-renowned. The oligarchs get on a private plane, they fly in, boom, 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 it's all taken care of. So certain things have changed. In terms of religious freedom, I would say I cannot think of anything that is forbidden at this point, at least not openly forbidden. There are summer Jewish summer camps, there are synagogues. Now, of course, there are no rabbis like me, because I'm the only one. So most of the rabbis are ultra-Orthodox rabbis from Brooklyn, New York, who don't speak a word of Russian, but they're willing to go there and struggle through. But again, this is it's a big part of my guilt. Here I am in Palm Beach, fancy, gorgeous, congregation. And meanwhile, there's still maybe 1 million Russian Jews left there. And most of them will never really be brought closer to the Torah, to God. Maybe some elderly show up, but I know the chief rabbi of Russia, and he's a nice guy from Switzerland. But unfortunately, they need rabbis like me who can speak to them on their level, on their language, and try to explain. So whenever I go there, I try to speak, and even in Israel, I go basically every year. I stand up and I speak in front of Russian Jews, and they open their mouth. It's like, really? You used to teach physics, and you believe in God? So, like in the Torah, like in the Bible, it took 40 years. That whole generation had to die, basically, from Egypt. God understood that freedom is not something that you just, okay, I will be now open-minded and free. You have to get, there is a famous line in Judaism, it was easier to get the Jewish people out of Egypt than to get Egypt out of the Jewish people. And this is what I teach every year when we speak about Passover. I tell people, forget Egypt. It's not about Egypt. It's not a cute story about something. It's about us. We all have Egypt inside of us. We all have pharaohs. We need to get rid of that pharaoh. So it took 40 years of that whole generation to die out, and hopefully the young generation will be different. Maybe they will. And I see this. I see this here and there, especially if they go to Israel. There are wonderful programs now. God bless the Jewish Agency and the Joint, the two major organizations. And they bring these kids to Israel for 10 days. This is Birthright Israel, which is a fabulous organization. They bring basically the Birthright, it's called. They feel that every Jewish kid has the right to visit Israel for 10 days for free. And so when they come to Israel and they see a gorgeous country, everybody's Jewish and it's proud and strong country, it changes their lives. The young kids, that's the future. I think that we have a chance. The older generation, it's too late now at this point. So they let them eat their ham and borscht in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv, and let them have their Christmas trees and celebrate Soviet. They still celebrate Soviet holidays, and I understand that. The most popular one is, of course, New Year's Eve, but the second one is May 9. May 9 is the Victory Day. So they all dress up, they put their medals, these old men, and they march in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and in many other places, even in Los Angeles, many times. In Miami, a couple of years ago, they asked me to address a group of veterans, and they were sitting in a Russian restaurant, Jewish elderly, eating ham, and they invited the rabbi to speak a little bit about victory and how come Americans don't give a damn about May 9th. Americans don't understand victory. In the Soviet Union, war was also a major thing. As it makes sense, when you want to brainwash people, when you want to tell them you're the luckiest person, even though there is no bread in the stores, you have to blame somebody. So they would blame American imperialism, and they would blame the war, the Nazis. We lost 20 million Russian people. I never heard about the 6 million Jews. Never heard about the Holocaust. Never. Never mentioned. Holocaust never mentioned. I thought that Hitler hated Russians. Meanwhile, my mom, may she rest in peace, lost everybody in 2 days, just shot, tortured. I never met my uncles, my grandparents, never. But I thought they were shot because they were Soviet citizens. I did not know that there was something about Nazism against Jews. We discovered about the gulags because of Solzhenitsyn, but again, it was not about the Jews. I thought this is about, people who disagreed with communism and stuff like this. And there was nothing Jewish about that. There was nothing Jewish about the war. There was nothing Jewish about the Holocaust. If anything, you know, we're the luckiest people. As young people, we would just have fun. So on Easter, we would go and stand outside of the church. I don't think I walked in, maybe once I walked in and I saw, you know, the priest walking in with the smoke and stuff. It was bizarre, it was weird, but it was cute. You meet cute girls outside and some eggs, colored eggs, and it made no sense. I heard the name Jesus a couple of times. That also did not make sense. And so once in a while, when somebody would throw this into my face, oh, you killed Jesus, and I would say, who? Who did I kill? Who is that? And then eventually I heard his name, but it didn't make sense to me. The whole story was kind of so far-fetched and so bizarre. And also it was dangerous. If you walked into a church and you were in college, chances are you would be kicked out. So we kind of knew that religion is for old babushkas, you know, they would stand there with a little candle, and had nothing to do with me. It had nothing to do with us. But it was cute. We would stand there, drink vodka, and sing some songs. And the songs were Soviet songs, communist songs, but, you know, great Lenin and stuff like this. Even at our parties, Jewish parties, we would get together, finish a few bottles of vodka. Even today, when we would get together, the only songs we know is stupid communist songs. I know the Soviet anthem by heart. I can wake me up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and the words are despicable, disgusting. Day after day, generations will pass, but nobody will ever forget the great name of Lenin. Lenin, всегда живой. Lenin is always alive. Lenin is in you. Lenin is in me. Lenin is everywhere. So just substitute Jesus or God, and you'll understand where it comes from. They stole everything from Judaism, actually, interestingly enough, for obvious reasons. Karl Marx grew up in a Jewish home, in a kosher home, so he just twisted a little bit and put man instead of God. But there was a famous line that we used to say almost every day: Lenin was, Lenin is, Lenin will be forever. We say this every Shabbat, every Sabbath, in our prayer book. You can open and I show you. Instead of Lenin, it says, who was, he was, he is, he will be forever. So it's Lenin. You walk into my office, I'll show you. I have portraits, I have posters of Lenin. People walk in and they say, why? I say, just to remind myself where I come from. If you call my cell phone, I have the Soviet anthem. People laugh, but I say, well, I don't want ever to forget. Of course, I will never forget. My children will never get it, of course. They grew up here. Most Americans, it's literally impossible. I discovered over the years. It's impossible for Americans to really get it, what we're talking about. It's not anything that you can imagine. I'm very concerned about America. I feel this is not the same America that I discovered when I arrived here in 1980. I think the most dangerous source of evil brainwashing and propaganda is coming from Ivy League schools, top-notch schools. The only place on earth where people still believe in Marxism and Leninism and communism. And I think that's also true in Europe. The top-notch professors at universities, and that's one of the reasons where anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism comes into the place, because communism, leftism, they believe that we don't need nation states. We should be, John Lennon. Imagine all the people, everything will be wonderful if we just sit down and smile and talk to each other, and we don't need borders, we don't need armies, and make love, not war, and all of that stuff. I think it started in the 60s, but I think it's worse than ever. I think so, because I think it got all the way to the White House now. It's interesting that American Jews still overwhelmingly are Democrats and supported Obama, less so than the first time. But it's fascinating that I would say close to 90% of Russian immigrants in this country voted Republican, They are registered Republicans. And it makes sense. When people ask me, you voted for the Republicans? I say, hey, I've been there. I've seen the other side. I saw what happens when the government gets into your bedrooms and into your homes, into your hearts, into your minds. I see this happening more and more. It's amazing that Governor Cuomo, just this week, he wanted to make limitation 8 bullets in your magazine. I mean, this is stupid. How are they going to enforce it? Which means they will knock on your door and say in Tennessee and say, we need to check your magazine. And what if you have 9 bullets there? I mean, think about this. This is against everything America stands for. The founders spilled blood on this holy land to basically get away from government control. They're getting into every area of our lives. That Bloomberg is going to decide how big is the cup of my Coca-Cola. I mean, and it's on so many levels. In general, America has changed dramatically. I came here right before Reagan. I remember being interviewed in the beginning. People said, oh, you're from the former Soviet Union, you were a dissident, what do you think? Who's going to win? And I said, that's obvious to me, Ronald Reagan. And this is before it became clear that he has a good chance. They said, really? Why? I said, finally, we have a president who gets it, who understands what the real evil is. The Soviet Union is not joking. They work 24/7 to destroy the world, to take over the world. They're not joking. They mean it. I meant it. Millions of people are willing to die to destroy America. And if you become wishy-washy, Jimmy Carter, let's sit down. I mean, President Obama, even 2 days ago in Jerusalem, had the goal to say to the Israelis, well, we still need to give diplomacy a chance. Excuse me, until when? Imagine, this is 1930s. Let's give Hitler another chance. Let's talk. Talk about what? They stand up day in and day out and they say, death to Israel, death to America. They call it the small Satan, the big Satan. So, I mean, the missiles were coming as he was talking from Gaza, and he had the chutzpah to say to the Israelis, you have to take chances for peace. What kind of chances? With your babies, with your children, what? You know, in Sderot, in that little town close to the border of Gaza, we have now a whole generation of children who, what is it called, wet their beds now. They're now they're 14, 15 years old. They grew up never taking off their clothes. Imagine, you're 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 5-year-old. Every night the siren goes. And you have, it used to be 30 seconds. I think now it's 17 seconds, 15 seconds to run into their shelter. What country on this planet would accept this? And he comes to Jerusalem, he says, you need to take more chances. It's disgusting. And Americans are just accepting it. It's getting worse. That he pulled our aircraft carriers from Persian Gulf. I mean, and he appointed new Secretary of Defense, a guy who clearly has an agenda, who basically does not believe in war altogether. Where is America? Who is going to lead the world? America was, and I hope it's still the last chance for humanity, but not with the way we're moving now. I mean, I'm not even talking about the economy. I'm not even talking about the economy. The half of the country is just getting something, but just philosophically, we forgot who we are. America used to stand for something. What do we stand for now? Again, over the years, I hurt my career, probably many times, when I would stand up and say, ACLU has done a lot of damage to this country. I think taking off the 10 Commandments out of every high school in America is horrible. I mean, I ask my people once in a while, tell me, is America better off today with Christianity in the corner, pushed down? Is America, do we have better values today? That's what Mike Stein said yesterday. I do believe that I hope Christians will take Christianity more seriously. I think America will become a better country. And I think, again, because of the brainwashing between academia and between the general media and culture, which means Hollywood, TV. Those three areas. So the news on TV that you get is very skewed. I mean, if anybody would say the things that they say against Christianity, I mean, imagine if anybody would say horrible things like this against people like you, passionate Christians. It's okay to say despicable things. If anybody would say anything like this about gays, that person had no chance in America. Or against black people, no chance in America. But it's okay to humiliate Christians, to make fun of Christianity. You're made, I mean, on campuses, people think that you're back in 12th century somewhere. You're like Taliban, basically. It's horrendous. So I always said that if Christians would take Christianity more seriously, America has a chance. My job is also to make Jews to take, Judaism more seriously, because I think Judaism has the answers for everything. I think Judaism is, as a Jew, I clearly chose Judaism. In many ways, I say to people, I am a Jew by choice, because when I came to this country, I could have become anything. I could have become a Buddhist, could have become just materialist and say, you know what, just let's make more money, whatever. I chose to teach Judaism because I believe it's the most beautiful, gorgeous system ever created by God or man to make a society a better place, to make human beings better and to make society better. But on campuses, most educated Americans with a BA, they think that human nature is wonderful, and it's Republicans who destroy America. It's racism, it's chauvinism, it's anti-gay, whatever it is. I mean, they always will find economy. They always will find an excuse why we have crime, why we have homelessness, why we have broken families. Nobody challenges them, really, unfortunately. I think we need more people who are brave, who will stand up and speak up on behalf of, and I hear some changes. I just had breakfast last Sunday with Eric Cantor, who is one of the leaders in the Republican Party, who stopped talking about deficit. He says, we need to stop talking about the budget deficit. Americans don't understand this. We need to talk about what is America all about. What is this country supposed to be? That's what we need to focus on. And I am very happy because they're constantly talking about taxes and deficit, and the average American has no patience, has no intelligence maybe, does not get it, says, forget it. I just want to watch football, have my beer, and put some food on the table. And I think Republican Party is totally lost, totally confused. They're fighting with each other. They're focusing on the wrong things. And as a result, this is what we get. Horrible. The worst. I've never seen anything. Since Carter, we never had anything as bad. And he meant it. Obama said, I want to transform America, and there is not enough rebellion. Not enough. I mean, Tea Parties tried, but even Tea Party, they have this image, they're primitive, they're this, big guns, they hunt, they're simplistic. We need to wake up Americans. And so people like you, God willing, have a chance with sophisticated media, with sophisticated approach, with good programming. Get to the kids, get to the young kids before they get brainwashed on campuses. I say to my kids, I actually do not want them to get into Ivy League schools. I would rather them go to University of Michigan. I would rather go them to Midwest, Washington University in St. Louis. I think Midwest and the South is the hope. I love the South. I love the Jews in the South also. They're much more traditional, much more down to earth. It's the New Yorkers and Californians who are in La La Land, solar energy. I mean, this is a joke. And, people are so passionate about global warming. You know what? I'm a physicist. I still have not seen real proof that this is a real issue. I mean, with all due respect to Al Gore, who made millions and millions of dollars on this agenda. I don't think this is the issue number one, that we still have to buy oil from evil societies and evil people while we have more oil than Saudis, because this president would not allow us to have pipes and drilling. I mean, it's sick. And where are the millions of Americans who are unemployed, who say, you know what? I want a job. I don't want to take from the government. I want to get a job. Dakotas are booming. They're begging for people to move to Dakotas because there is a lot of jobs there. But we would not, because Hollywood cares very much about the environment, and God forbid we will. I mean, again, it's been proven by the government agencies that there is no danger of ruining the water. What are we waiting for? The Canadians are going to make it. The Chinese are going to make it. We're going to be behind. Another few years, we will not be a superpower in any way. Not economically, not militarily, not intellectually, not in any way, unless the pendulum swings. But I am an optimist. I love this country. I've been all over the world. I do believe the American spirit. I do believe that Americans, you can push them up to a point, but sooner or later they will say, stop it, enough. So the question is about my transformation, my spiritual transformation. I have to mention that in the Soviet Union, every science teacher had to also teach scientific atheism, which is a subject that every high school kid had to take. I had an A in scientific atheism. I'm probably one of the few rabbis in the world. I used science to prove to Soviet children that there is no God and only mentally sick people believe in God. And of course it was primitive, they would say, guess what, there is a book called the Bible. And they say that God created the world in 7 days. This is ridiculous. Here we have proof. It's 20 million. It's a joke, obviously. Anyway, so my transformation was, it didn't happen overnight. First, I became a Zionist, continually being slapped on the face. You're Feldman, you don't have a chance, you don't have a chance. And then eventually, in college, I met some dissidents and they gave me a book to read, and that was Exodus by Leonid. And that was a best-selling book that was translated into many languages around the world. There was a famous movie with Paul Newman. Anyway, that book changed my life. That was the first transformation. I woke up emotionally and said, wow, I don't have to apologize for being Jewish. There is actually a country called Israel, and it's for the Jews, and it's okay to be Feldman, and we should be proud of it. And I have a book called the Bible, and I have a language called Hebrew. And they've been lying to me all my life. And so I become a Zionist. I basically say, you know what? I need to get out of here. I want to go to Israel. And that was obviously not so simple, complicated. I became a refusenik, a dissident, went on a hunger strike, was arrested, continued my hunger strike, and then for some reason, I kind of suspect why, I was given my visa. And the reason is obvious. There were enough people in the West who wrote petitions or signed petitions or wrote postcards or made phone calls or protested in front of Soviet consulates or embassies. And so one day it was not worth it for them to upset too many Nicaraguan peasants, because people all over the world will see this kid is willing to die. He's on a hunger strike because they wouldn't let him be Jewish. Something does not make sense. That's another thing that Americans don't get. I hear this again and again. I used to lecture all over the country, and people would say to me because I would say, thank you. If you marched for Soviet Jewry, if you put a poster outside of your synagogue, if you signed a petition, you saved my life. And people would come to me and say, yeah, I remember. The rabbi walked in, or the pastor walked in and said, we need to sign this petition. There is a guy dying there. I didn't understand. Why would a superpower care about some teenagers signing a petition? And you explained to me the first time. In America, we never understood. That's what people would say to me, that the Soviet Union had an agenda. Again, it's something that people don't get even today. They think Putin is just another guy. I mean, the Soviet Union wanted to take over the world. So even Vietnam War, I meet people, intelligent people, who are totally confused about Vietnam War. My secretary is proud that she marched, changed herself, and make love, not war. I mean, it was terribly done, perhaps. What's the word? Executed. But the goal, America had to stop the spread of communism. It is like cancer, basically. And you have a country just 65 miles away that still is communist and stuff. Anyway, so propaganda. So the Soviets were very scared of bad publicity in the West. Anyway, so I become a Zionist, and eventually I do get out and I go to Israel. And in Israel, I became a good Israeli. I learned Hebrew. I went to the army, got another master's, but I was not religious. In Israel, unfortunately, I saw only one kind of religion, ultra-Orthodox religion, people who wear coats from 16th century, who are fanatics, who don't believe in science, who don't allow kids to watch TV or listen to the radio. It did not make sense to me. Besides, I saw them throwing rocks on the Sabbath at other Jews throwing rocks at other Jews and calling them bad names because they were driving on Sabbath. I said, if this is religion, thanks a lot. Anyway, eventually I get a job in Italy to work with Russian refugees who choose to get out, but not to go to Israel, to go to America, Canada, Australia. So I had a fascinating job. I kind of suddenly had to explain to these thousands of Jews coming out. 1979 was the highest immigration level. Suddenly I had to prepare them for Rosh Hashanah, New Year that happens not in December, but in September. And I had to prepare them, and I had to rent a huge hotel room and bring a rabbi from Switzerland and something. So I began to read about this stuff because my boss in Jerusalem says, okay, you need to kind of prepare them. I want 3,000 Russians in that room. And I began to read a little bit about Rosh Hashanah and other holidays, and I said, it's interesting stuff. It's not weird, it's not voodoo, it's something actually logical. Anyway, I began to read. I still was not religious at that point, but I was beginning to learn a little bit. Then a year later, I come to America, and I came to the States to get a PhD at Columbia University. I met a professor in Jerusalem who invited me, and I couldn't afford Columbia University. I ended up in Los Angeles by coincidence, and in Los Angeles, I was very lucky. I was introduced to two men who changed my life, and one of them you know very well, Dennis Prager and Rabbi Joseph Telushkin, two young men who became very famous. They wrote a book at the age of 25, and the book is called The 9 Questions People Ask About Judaism. And 3 people, when I just arrived, the first 3 days in Los Angeles, 3 people, after talking to me, I was interviewing for jobs, they said, you know, you remind me of somebody. Do you know the name Dennis Prager? I said, no. Joseph Telushkin? No. You should meet them. There are 2 young men here in Los Angeles. You guys will like each other. There is something, you're passionate about similar things. Anyway, one of the 3 people said, oh, I actually have their book. You should read this book. And I opened that book, and there were 9 chapters, and one of them goes like this. What is the difference between Marxism, communism, socialism, and Judaism? I said, what do these have in common? It's like, what? Strange question. So I began to read from that chapter. By the way, there is also a chapter, what's the difference between Christianity and Judaism? I would strongly recommend this because a lot of Jews think that the difference is Jesus, and it's not. There's much more. Anyway, so I read that chapter, and I said, wow. First of all, these guys are brilliant. They really understand who I am. They understand where I come from, because until then, every American was kind of so simplistic and stupid. Oh, you're from Russia, it's cold there, right? And I would say, no, I come from a very nice climate. I saw snow a few times in my life. Oh, it's not cold? Because Americans have this image of Dr. Zhivago, you know, Siberia. I've never been to Siberia. Anyway, so suddenly I read these 2 young guys, American-born, Brooklyn-born, and they know so much about communism. And then they're comparing it to Judaism, and I said, that's interesting. that basically Karl Marx stole most ideas from the Bible. Wow. So then I began to read the other chapters of that book. Changed my life. And then I met somebody, and I said, do you know the name Dennis Prager? And this woman says, sure, everybody knows. Why? How do you know this name? I said, I read that book, it's fascinating. And she says, would you like to meet these two guys? I said, of course. And we met. And my rabbi, who came to my bar mitzvah last week, from this pulpit, told that story. He says, I remember meeting this young guy, broken English, and we fell in love with him, and we became close friends, and basically that was it. That book and these two men, for the first time in my life, showed me that Judaism is very logical, that you are not only permitted, but you're encouraged to ask questions. The name of my people, Israel, means struggle with God, the opposite of Islam, which means submit to God. In Judaism, we're encouraged to ask questions. The Seder begins with a kid, the youngest kid, asking 4 questions. What's going on here? I want to know. Judaism, and I was always questioning and got into trouble. And I assumed that basically Judaism is like the Russian Orthodox, you know, you accept Jesus or you don't accept Jesus. So chapter 1 is fascinating in that book. Can a Jew doubt God's existence and still be a good Jew? I said, of course not. Can you be a good Christian if you doubt Jesus? Of course not. And then the answer is absolutely. And I said, wow, this is amazing. So I fell in love because of that book and because of my 2 closest friends. A year later, less than a year later, I was in rabbinical school. And that's the beginning, of course. And then 6 years later, I became a rabbi. And I started in Los Angeles the first 3 years, and in New York the next 3 years. And then I lectured and traveled all over. I got to know America very well. I worked for national organizations, and I was going from campus to campus. At the same time, speaking on behalf of Soviet Jewry, which my brothers and sisters were still in jails and so on. And then one day somebody said, you know, there is an interesting town called Palm Beach, Florida, and there is an interesting synagogue, sleepy place, and you have a chance there. It's an interesting potential. And I kind of got tired of traveling. I said, you know what, let me look into this. So I arrived in Palm Beach, not West Palm Beach, Palm Beach. And people were actually not obnoxious, even though they were wealthy. People were very sweet and nice. And I said, if I can create something exciting in Palm Beach, I can create it anywhere. Because intellectually and spiritually, this is a desert. This is probably the worst town in America in many ways. People usually at the end of their lives, been there, done it. My kids are bar mitzvahed already. I just want to play golf, and I want to play tennis and play cards, and are we going to Italian restaurant or Chinese tonight? And but because it was a wealthy congregation, I was able to bring all my friends from all over the world. So it became an intellectual mecca. So Dennis Prager spoke there many times. Famous scholars, professors from Jerusalem. I attracted Orthodox rabbis, ultra-Orthodox rabbis, because it was worth it for them to come. I would have 600 people there, wealthy people, very Orthodox. I had a rabbi with a long beard, a Hasidic rabbi from Israel, who was impressed, and he was willing to come to a conservative congregation and to speak. And so it became a very exciting place. And then, as usual, as we say in the Torah, Yakom Melech Chadash, a new Pharaoh came, and he did not know Joseph. So there was a new president, extremely wealthy, who did not like the fact that I was very powerful and independent and influential, and he wanted to control me. And one of the first things he did was he stopped my participation in that on that Christian channel. I have somewhere 200 tapes, not the DVDs, but the old ones. I don't know if one day I may transfer them into DVDs. But I used to be on a Christian channel with Faye Hardin. I don't know if you know that name. She was kind of a lay minister in Orlando area. Came to the temple one day and liked me. And she invited me to be on her show. First she interviewed me, and kind of like slowly she says, you know, people called and said they want to learn the Bible with you. Teach us Torah. And I was just basically being a rabbi. I would just open the Torah and say, let's look into Noah's story. And it's not a cute story for children about some, you know, little boat and so on. This is a profound story. Let's try to understand on a deeper level. And people began to call the channel and say, wow, we want this rabbi. And interestingly enough, Jews who would have never walked into a synagogue, they watched that show. So I would go to a supermarket and an old lady would say, I saw you on television at 2 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep. I was switching channels. I never understood the story of Jacob. I never understood that Joseph, oh wow, that was interesting. I went to Hebrew school. Nobody ever explained this to me. So that's another thing. Unfortunately, a lot of damage has been done through Hebrew schools. And I suspect the same about Sunday schools and churches. Very many rabbis, I'm not going to attack ministers, but many rabbis have trained several generations of people who think that this is a ridiculous, boring thing called Judaism. I don't teach this way. Maybe because I did not grow up with that. I never had that negative stereotype. I do believe this is the most gorgeous thing. I'm in love with Judaism. And I'm constantly learning, and I'm constantly challenging myself, and constantly preparing. And I have a class here on Ecclesiastes. I get 60, 80 people week after week after week. Former judges and lawyers and business people, doctors, and we go very deeply. It's the most profound book ever written, and I discovered that most people never heard about it. Most Jewish people never heard about the wisest book written by the wisest man who ever lived, King Solomon, at the end of his life. I would be curious, the wisest man, what does he have to say at the end of his life? He had it all. He had all the money in the world, all the women in the world, all the power in the world, what does he say about the meaning in life? So, and these people, again, they're in their 60s and 80s, and they say, how come my rabbi never taught this? How come I never heard about this book? It's sad. It hurts me. When I meet Jews in the streets and they say, oh, sorry, I don't go to synagogue. I don't like it. And it hurts me. When people say this is boring, prayer is boring, it hurts me. I say, somebody misled millions of people. And unfortunately, the more educated they are, the worse the attitude. That's why I think people like you are being made fun of. These people who talk to God, who hear God. Come on, this is primitive stuff. They believe in miracles. There is somebody who is watching over us, who wants the Jewish people to succeed and to become light to the nations. And with Christians like you, with a TV station like this, we have a chance. God bless you for what you're doing for the Jewish people and for Israel, because that's the only hope for humanity. Otherwise, we will all be under Taliban, because this is the new evil that is serious, that is not joking. Billions of people are being invested in this. And again, our liberal media, God forbid, we don't want to upset Islam, we don't want to say anything negative, we have to walk thin line and so on. Nobody has the guts to stand up and to say this is evil, and it's not just Osama bin Laden. It's happening in America. There are mosques right here that teach young Muslim children evil things about America. We see what's going on in London. We see what's going on in Norway. Norway has become the most anti-Semitic country in the world. There are maybe 300 Jews left in Oslo. They're the most, they used to be the liberal, open-minded. This is another thing, that my people don't get it. That evil is not coming from a right-wing, evangelical Christians or rednecks in Oklahoma or Tennessee. The evil is coming from Harvard and Columbia and Yale and Princeton and UCLA and Berkeley and so on. And of course, their grandchildren all are smart, and they all want to end up in Yale and Harvard, which is where they're getting brainwashed. And New York Times is another source of evil, unfortunately. And television. So that's why channels like yours and networks like yours are so important. God bless you. Thank you.